Hi, I'm Rebecca Hardy, President of Texans for Vaccine Choice. As you might have seen, a vaccine choice-friendly pediatrician from Shine has teamed up with TFVC. As a result, Team TFVC got to join well-known pediatrician Dr. Randy Nadeau for a two-part series where we discussed several meaty topics, from wellness checks to medical kidnapping and CPS investigations to, of course, the legislative landscape here in Texas. So instead of your normal installment of Shot Callers, we are presenting to you our conversation with the team at Shine. We hope you enjoy these thoughtful discussions.
Welcome. I'm so excited to have you guys join. We have so many RSVP'd and we love that you're here with us tonight. Such an important topic, and we're so grateful to have Carrie and Rebecca with us. As you're joining on, would you please just find the chat, tell us where you're from, maybe even if you already have a question or something you want to learn about tonight. We'd love to hear from you in the chat, and I will be watching that throughout the presentation, so you can put your questions in. But Dr. Nadeau, why don't you just kind of tell us what was on your heart when we, had this idea to do this talk?
Yeah, I'll kind of tell you what the Lord has really been speaking to me about over the past few days. I just came from outside and I was grounding, walking in my backyard. This is a big event. This means a ton that Texans for Vaccines Choice is here in Shepherd. I want to thank Nurse Flagey for being able to organize and put this on. I think the one thing that I want to share is more of a spiritual thing. Doesn't really have a lot to do, quote unquote, with medicine. I shared this with my nieces and nephews probably about 2 years ago. I think that there is an onslaught of spiritual attack on our children. That attack is not something that's new. This has been around before. But I think that our communities are undergoing a time where we have walked so far away from God that we are trying to figure out why we are in the condition that we're in right now. And when I talk to my nieces and nephews, I talk to them about how Satan attacks us through our five senses. And those five senses are, you already know that. I don't have to tell you what the five senses are. And as a pediatrician, our children are the most vulnerable to those five senses. We as adults, we have the ability to kind of think with our mind and understand how to deal with the complexities of life. But our children, on the other hand, deal with these five senses. And there's a constant onslaught every day on those five senses to pull them away from God. I made a decision back in 2006 when the Holy Spirit really revealed to me about what my purpose was as a pediatrician. Was one of the first things is, what do I put in my mouth? And that's a sense, right? That's a taste sense. But that embarked me upon an amazing journey in becoming as astute as I could about nutrition. But another thing that came about when I was at Dyess Air Force Base was this whole thing about vaccines. And that is another way that our children are subtly being influenced by a world that is not what we want from them. And I won't go into whether there's a place for vaccines or not and what you believe in as a parent. But I want this message really for the parent who has made a decision and said, I'm done with this. This is not the way that God wants me to raise my child in this world. And that is a revelation that came to me. It came to me in my walk as a individual that was in the military, that went through the traditional vaccine schedule as an active duty member. It is a decision that I've made as a parent with having 3 children. And it's hard. It's hard as a physician, as an MD, in the way that I've been trained. I have to take off my hat as a parent and put on my hat as a physician to give parents their options about what they're going to do with vaccines. But I have a lot of families who have made the decision like me in what to do about vaccines. And so TFVC has really been instrumental in giving tangible ways for families who have made this decision to not feel like they're an outcast and understand how to navigate the waters of the society that we live in that almost looks at us as an outcast or a remnant, as they talk about in the Bible. So when you hear this message today, if you have made a decision like I have made, then you really, you have to carry yourself at a level that is much higher than what the world standards are. There's a target on your back about the decision that you made, and it's not going to get any easier. It's only going to get more challenging and harder. And so listen to what Carrie and Rebecca talk about, because as I've witnessed in just the past month, I have seen a child removed from a parent, and that parent has no influence on their child anymore. And that was another really eye-opening moment to me. So again, Carrie, Rebecca, sorry for taking up all of y'all's time, but the floor is y'all's to speak about what we're going to talk about today.
Everybody, it looks like just about everybody's getting on. Go ahead and find the chat. Let us know where you're from, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, well, I'm going to launch that screen share,
Awesome.
right? And I think we had it right.
And I just wanted to let everybody know that these ladies are amazing. They are in Austin all the time, constantly fighting for our rights. So we owe them a huge debt of gratitude that we have a choice in Texas, because I think they'll tell you that the choice is up for grabs all the time, and it's constant battle. So thank y'all for fighting for us.
Yes. Well, I just want to start by just thanking both of you guys for having us today. And what an honor it is to partner with Shine Pediatrics. We are so blessed as North Texans, and I know you have patients from across the state that come and see you. So really not just North Texas, but the state of Texas we are blessed to have y'all providing what fascinatingly has become rarer these days, is true patient-centered care when it comes to our most precious assets, our resources, our children, right? And this is week one of a two-part series, and Carrie is here to give the real meat of the presentation. I know in the blurb about this week, we had talked about how to protect yourself against some issues regarding CPS overreach. And so Carrie's going to do the heavy lifting there, but I am going to just kind of give an overview of what TFVC is, who we are, and what we do. I'll be very brief because I know that's really not what you're here for, but I do want you to understand why we exist and such. But before that, just very briefly, I am Rebecca Hardy. I am one of the founders and currently serve as the president of Texans for Vaccine Choice. This is truly I feel like it's my life's work here. And let's be clear, nobody wakes up one day and says, let's take on vaccine choice politics, right? And so most days it is a ministry, as you can imagine, but every day it is a mission that we are filled with joy and honor to kind of carry this torch in Texas. I am a speech language pathologist by background. I practiced for 20 years before I was able to kind of fully hang up that speech path hat and do TFVC full time. But it was really those early days right out of grad school when I was setting up my practice, when I saw too many kids with catastrophic regressions in development, and too many of the moms had very similar stories of normal development arrested by a shot visit. And just as a young woman right out of grad school, I wasn't married. I wasn't, kids were not even on my brain. I didn't know the Lord at the time either. Even then, with all of those cards stacked against me, I still remember going home at night thinking something's not quite right here. And so that's really what those early years as a speech pathologist is really what shaped my philosophy regarding vaccines moving forward. And, everything really changes once it's your own kids, right? And we have two beautiful daughters that are teenagers now, and we have made very different vaccine decisions for them. And I will just tell you, they are the healthiest kiddos I know. With that said, moving on to Texans for Vaccine Choice, our acronym, like Dr. Naidoo said, is TFVC. We were founded in 2015, and we are a grassroots-driven organization. We're focused on advocacy, both legislatively and in the community. And we were launched because of a mandate bill that was filed in our Texas legislature in 2006. That would have removed the exemptions that Texas school children have enjoyed for decades and decades in Texas. So we are 9 years young, and we are the largest and oldest organization in Texas dedicated to protecting and advancing your rights of informed consent, medical privacy, and vaccine choice. And we do that through public policy efforts, through educational resources, and ensuring that this community remains engaged and connected. And I just want to piggyback on what Dr. Naidoo said about this community and what TFVC has provided, because I think he really did hit the nail on the head when he talked about, this is so many of our families to have felt for years marginalized or in the shadows. And TFVC has become this vehicle for people to come out of the shadows and say, you know what, I have a tribe, I have a community, I'm not alone. And I just loved what he said as well about this attack on our children, because it is a daily fight for the hearts, souls, minds, and bodies of our children. And so we are here to provide one piece of support for families when it comes to these vaccine decisions. And tonight's presentation really isn't tons about vaccine safety. I know y'all get that a lot at Dr. Naidoo's office. We're talking a little bit more about some of the more nuanced issues that our families face. So our history is that we have been very successful ousting a lot of really bad tyrants, some lackluster incumbents, if you will, when it comes to your medical rights. And we have also been able to, prior to 2023, gotten some pro-parent, pro-liberty amendments added to some bills. In this past 2023 session, and that we will cover that a little bit more in week 2, we were able to get 5 standalone vaccine choice, proactive, protective bills over the finish line and fully passed by the legislature. We also maintained our perfect record of defeating every single bad bill. And we hosted numerous kind of citizen engagement days where we had about a combined total of about 150 advocates show up at the Capitol across several events. And they made hundreds, probably countless office visits. And this is just your reminder that vaccine choice does matter, because all medical procedures carry some risks for some people. And, this is not an urban legend. It's not some myth. I mean, this is a known medical fact. And with that fact, there must always be an option to decline without consequence. And mandates do inherently interfere with your relationship with your doctor or your faith leader or what have you. The bottom line is that medical mandates have no place in a free society. So what do we do? So some of the pictures here is of our beautiful outreach coordinators. So some of the things we do, we provide lots of resources, training, meetings like this one, whether they're virtual or in person. All of this is free of charge to anyone. We are not in the business of trying to hide information or put it behind a paywall. We really want these resources in as many hands as possible, because we know that Big Pharma likes to, call us misinformation. Well, we provide the missing information, and we want to make sure there's no barrier to that. We have vaccine schedule comparisons. We have vaccine ingredient pamphlets. We have exemption templates, vaccine injury guides. all on our website. The one thing I really do want to make sure we highlight at this moment, because this is a pediatrician's office, is we have this new parent informed consent bundle. This is a beautiful gift that you can give either with your name on it, or you can send it anonymously. So if you have a friend you've kind of been struggling having the talk with, you can gift this new parent informed consent bundle to them. And it comes with a children's book, a TFVC onesie, a handwritten note from our team, and a beautiful folder full of all the information that you could possibly want as you navigate these somewhat tricky decisions about vaccines.
I'll put a link to that in the chat for you, Rebecca. I'll add that in.
Thank you. Great. We also get involved in elections. We work with officials to make sure that good policy is getting drafted and hopefully championed in Austin. We release timely action alerts with our growing community of supporters like you guys. When vaccine policy is on the move, whether it's legislatively or just in the community, we will release an action alert to help move the needle for liberty. We have our own podcast where we consult doctors and industry experts. That's releases a couple of times a month. And we have recently, in the past year and a half, built an extensive outreach program, thanks to our outreach director, Carrie Bickford, to really, we have a hearts and minds issue, as Dr. Nadeau very eloquently talked about in the beginning. Let's pretend we could pass every bill we could possibly want tomorrow in Austin. We're not there yet, but we will be. But let's pretend we could. That doesn't solve the hearts and minds issue we have with our friends, family, and neighbors. And so that's really why our outreach program was launched, to solve that problem. So you can see we're really busy tackling this issue from really every angle, from elections to the Capitol to education to resources. Our hearts are really to educate. We get this asked a lot on how did COVID impact the vaccine choice movement in Texas? And it really pulled the wool off of so many people's eyes about just how much undue influence Big Pharma has in nearly every aspect of our lives. And so that kind of collective revelation has led to a whole-scale skepticism of kind of the global vaccine schedule and policies that we've kind of, for the most part, most society has accepted. And now we have a lot more support. This is a topic that, 5 years ago, we were still having a lot of these conversations in hushed tones in the hallways. And now I can't hardly go anywhere without vaccines being brought up. And I promise you, I'm not the one bringing it up, even though you would think it would be the other way around. Okay, enough about TFVC. I want to introduce Carrie. Before I do, I just want to make sure y'all know we are not lawyers. We are not medical professionals of any sort. We are simply advocates, activists that have been on the front lines of several of the issues that we are going to be discussing tonight. And so we are here to provide our best advice based on that experience. But of course, always consult with your own professionals about your specific situation. And with that, I will just tell you, we welcome all people to this fight. This, like I said earlier, this is not really a battle anybody chooses, but it's a vital and worthy cause. And we are driven by everyday people like you. So Carrie has been a medical liberty advocate for 20 years in other states, and we snatched her up as soon as she got here to Texas. She is a wealth of information. You're going to adore listening to her. And so without further ado, Carrie Bickford.
Thank you so much. Are you going to take the screen away, Rebecca?
I am trying to figure out how to do that. We didn't talk about how to do that.
We didn't talk about how to do that on our discovery call.
Okay.
Hi, you guys. I am Carrie Bickford. I am the outreach director with Texans for Vaccine Choice. I started as a volunteer. Over 2 decades ago, I was touched by vaccine injury when a very close friend of mine lost her daughter to a vaccine injury at 4 months. And my friend could not actually survive that trauma and ended up taking her own life. And that is what sparked me into advocating for choice, and informed consent is something I'm really passionate about. And today we are going to talk about some really important issues to kind of help you as a parent better advocate for your baby and to know your rights and to effectively articulate and communicate with your staff, the people that are there to help you with your baby and to make the best choices that you possibly can. Thank you so much to Dr. Naidoo and to Nurse Christine for letting us come here today. I'm going to try and share my screen and hope that it goes as smoothly as it did before. So cross your fingers, everybody. Let's see, I'm going to do this and do that and hit that. Huzzah! Okay, so first we're going to talk about well visits. So well visits, we feel, even though we're not doctors and we're not lawyers and we're not here to give you that advice, annual well visits are very valuable touch points between you and your trusted health provider. You don't have to go see just a pediatrician. Dr. Naidoo is an excellent pediatrician, and if you can see him, do that. But many other types of healthcare providers can be used for well visits, including family physicians, functional medicine providers, chiropractors, naturopaths, homeopaths, and pediatricians like Dr. Naidoo. It is extremely important because in addition to providing valuable feedback about the development of your child, annual well checks provide families with a paper trail of medical care that could provide a layer of protection in a potential hypothetical or real CPS investigation. Dr. Naidoo, did you have anything else to add about how you view well visits as a provider?
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. I think that's a really alter issue here, especially in the infants who are the 0 to 2 years of age, even like a step further than just the annual checkups, but like the 2-month-old, the 4-month-old, the 6-month-old, the 9-month-old, the year, the 15-month, the 18-month, the 2 years. I've seen a couple of families in the practice who have made statements such as, my kiddo's healthy, we're not doing anything with vaccines. I just didn't think it was necessary for me to make those appointments. And I tell the families that's even more of a reason to make those appointments. And those appointments are pretty simple. The kiddos are very healthy. They're growing well. The parents know what to do. It's their second, third, or fourth child. But I think having that on paper is extremely valuable.
Yes. Wonderful. How do you view yourself? Do you view yourself as in a partnership with parents, or how does that dynamic look for you in a well visit scenario?
100%. I mean, I think anybody that knows Shine knows that we are, a parent-driven practice, and I think we have a lot of iterations of the way that you can raise your child. We don't try to dictate that there's only one way. I think the main component that we want to see is, number one, the growth chart. We want to see that a child is growing well. And then number two is we want to see that, quote unquote, those developmental milestones. I think the longer we do pediatrics, the more that we can just kind of walk in a room and know that the child is developing very well. But also the basic things like making sure there's no heart murmurs, congenital heart issues that may arise, making sure that there's no other sorts of congenital anomalies that have been missed. And sometimes there are other sorts of physical ailments that come up that you won't really be able to know as a parent unless there's a clinician, a physician that is examining your child.
Those are all excellent points. When parents reach out to us, one of the things that we will advise them is that, because they always ask, how can I tell if it's a good pediatrician or not great one, And I always say, well, it comes down to whether or not you can trust to take that person's advice. And it's easy to dictate if you can trust them when they view their relationship to you as a partnership in a, similar outcome of a healthy baby. When they view you as a partner and not someone to dictate things to, that can be a wonderful indicator that that's someone you can have a great relationship with for the benefit of your child.
And Carrie, I'll say like one last thing on that, because I've gone to so many conferences. I've talked to other colleagues across the nation. I think the elephant in the room, the core issue is vaccines. I think if you go to any physician who has an open mind about the vaccine discussion, you're in the right place. That is a good physician to be around.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So that's just kind of well visits, very important for lots of different reasons. And that's one of the big things people ask about. And then on that CPS involvement case that you are protected in with a well visit, what does Texas law say about our issues and CPS involvement? So luckily, Texas has TFVC. And because of TFVC's work in the 2017 legislative session, there are 2 places in the family code that specifically address this issue. The codes make it clear that not vaccinating is not ground for removing the child from the home, and it is not grounds for terminating parental rights, which are 2 very important points. So it's really great to be aware that those are your rights. There's nothing legally wrong about choosing to delay or decline 1 or more vaccinations. And additionally, due again to TFVC's efforts in the 2021 legislative session, we passed a medical protections bill, which means if parents seek an opinion from more than 1 medical provider, or transfer child's medical care to a new medical provider, or transfer your child to another healthcare facility, these actions are also not grounds for removing the child from the home and not grounds for terminating parental rights. I know that you had referenced earlier, Dr. Naidu, a case of someone losing custody of their child because of a sudden hospital situation. Do these family codes help you
Yes.
clarify and communicate with your families?
They do. I mean, it's something that we're continuing to educate our office on in terms of our immediate staff. But I think for the families that are on here today, one thing that was a real kind of core issue was the emergency removal versus the court order. And for families to really know who are patients of our practice at Shine, that if you are ever in disagreement with the decisions that are being made in an ER or urgent care type of setting, to make sure that you contact our office while you're there at the hospital, so that we can have that peer-to-peer conversation with the other physician or healthcare provider who feels like it may be urgent or emergent. And I think a real big delineating factor in that is that child at potential loss of life, so death, or is there such extenuating circumstances that there's potential severe morbidity for that child? And if a parent just says, well, I'm not going to do what you are recommending and leave against medical advice or AMA, I think it puts another bullseye on here about the CPS issue. And I think whenever parents are making those decisions, they need to communicate with their office or whoever your medical provider is.
Right. One more reason to do that extra step and really find that partner in your healthcare journey that can really go to bat for you and your child that you can be in relationship with.
I want to add one other thing. These are really great protective codes, right? What I want to make clear, and this is what we'll kind of get to, is that while not vaccinating and transferring care and all of this is not grounds for, removing the child or for terminating parental rights, it doesn't say CPS don't investigate.
Right.
You could still be investigated. And I think that's a distinction that is important to just be really frank about with our listeners tonight, in that you could still get an investigation over these things, but those codes should, come into play as far as protecting after the fact or during the investigation.
Mm-hmm. So every parent's worst nightmare is that something happens where CPS is involved and then they experience a medical kidnapping. So a medical kidnapping occurs when a medical professional believes that you have caused your child harm and calls CPS to investigate, often leading to the child being taken into custody. This is often the result of the medical professional thinking that you are abusing or neglecting your child, withholding life-saving treatments from your child, or declining certain medical treatments, sometimes including vaccines, depending upon the individual perspective of the healthcare workers. Sometimes they will attempt to do that. Essentially, if you are doing anything that they think endangers the child's well-being, they have a legal right to call CPS. And despite all the protective statutes that we mentioned before, just like Rebecca said, that should protect Texas parents, medical kidnapping does still occur in Texas. Dr. Nadeau, you were talking about that is this a common thing that you have happen, or what should parents do in that situation?
It has not been a common scenario, but I do think it's much more of a risk factor for patients in our practice by the decisions that families make. And so I think the one thing, again, to drive home the point is really encouraging families to have that doctor to doctor connection if you are not in agreement with the medical plan. Because sometimes too, for me, Carrie, have been through this on several different occasions. Sometimes you have to learn how to give and take. You have to learn how to choose which battle you're going to fight. And sometimes parents pick certain battles that really are very minuscule in the grand scheme of things. And that's something that only a medical professional can really talk to a parent about, because sometimes a parent gets sometimes flustered by something like an antibiotic. And I get it. I mean, sometimes there are concerns about antibiotics, but in the bigger scheme of things, of you having your relationship with your child, that is much more critical than an antibiotic.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good perspective. Thank you so much for sharing that. So what you need to know, just kind of like you said, it is rare. It typically involves either an accusation of medical neglect, or on the other extreme, the accusation of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, where a parent is regarded as seeking too much medical care. And there are real cases of both scenarios, but sometimes good families get caught in false accusations. Have you ever come across a case of medical kidnapping where you felt Munchausen syndrome or proxy was at play, Dr. Nadeau?
Yes, we almost ran into that issue with two patients with mental health conditions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Both of them stemming from like PANS-PANDAS related issues. But yeah, I've definitely been a part of that.
Okay. How do you, as a parent, mitigate an accusation of neglect like that? Or how do you, as a provider, recognize the signs of Munchausen syndrome by proxy that's endangering a child?
So maybe phrase that question one more time again, Carrie.
Well, I guess it's a two-part question. Like, one, how do you as a parent who's being accused of something mitigate that accusation of neglect, right? Because it says we can maintain a paper trail, but how do you as a provider, like, how do you tell the difference when you're interacting with parents? What is, a concerned parent from someone who is giving flags?
Yeah, I think a lot of times on the neglect side, you can kind of see the physical signs and symptoms of a child. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can look through in the medical record. I think one of the most blatant parts is the growth curve, the height and the weight. You see a lot of issues there, or the head circumference size, where the child's head is not growing. Those are really concerning signs that there is maybe potentially some sort of neglect or other severe medical condition going on. But I think the physical neglect component is a lot easier than obviously the Munchausen one. I think the Munchausen one, the one thing that I would appreciate is trying to get the patient to be kind of away from the parent and get a chance to have a one-on-one kind of dialogue with that child and get to know who they are. I think sometimes in medicine, especially in pediatrics, we get so focused on talking to the parent, we kind of neglect to engage and connect with the child. And sometimes when we connect with the child, they will tell us a lot through of their experience. So I think that's another way to look at things with the Munchausen component.
That is such a great perspective. I mean, truly, listening to you talk, your area is so lucky to have you. Thank you so much. So as a parent, most parents are good parents, and certainly the parents who are making an effort to pursue a path of health with a partner like you, they would likely need to mitigate an accusation of neglect. So having a paper trail with, the 2-month check, the 4-month checks, having the healthy head circumference, the healthy, proof of thriving, and then maintaining a good relationship with your provider of choice, and, making sure that they're there to go to bat for you is definitely the way to go, right?
Absolutely. Another thing that I would tell families who are on this call is that if you have a lot of dissension in the family, I think there's a lot of families who are just not in alignment of how they want to raise their kid. Maybe there's a grandparent or there's an aunt or an uncle, And I think sometimes there can be almost a level of vindictiveness in that relationship. And there's, CPS allegations or complaints filed just within the same family. So I think families also need to be aware of like what the tension is in their current family households. That's going to play a major role as well.
That's also a very good point. And sometimes that vindictiveness of family members can cause a false accusation of a Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And that, typically can happen also from a medical provider when you are a parent of a child with complex needs or mental health issues. And so do you agree with what the information here says, that maintaining a folder with one-pagers from each care provider or specialist that documents the diagnosis and kind of tracks what's happening so that anybody could just come and follow what's going on?
Yeah, I think that, I didn't even read that there, but I mean, again, you are absolutely right that one pager, because a lot of times too in medicine, when parents are seeing multiple providers or multiple specialty providers, those notes don't always come back to our office. So as a parent, you have a right to those consult notes, to those letters, to those labs, to the imaging studies that are done. So if you keep that folder, especially when you have a complex child, that's showing the medical personnel that you really care and know about your child. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, Rebecca had mentioned our resources. We actually have like a craft project to help people create, a binder to prepare for a hospital admission and to be able to document everything about that experience really thoroughly. And having this conversation with you has kind of inspired me to think that we're also going to be soon creating, one for complex medical cases where you can really just kind of track a child's, medical experience and what does that look like.
And Carrie, I want to chime in right quick. And this is something when I say maintain a folder of one pagers, I don't mean a tote bag full of binders of every lab and image and everything. When you're in an emergency situation, you want to be able to grab that one folder of one pager so that those doctors can quickly see, because your child could be that, 1 in a million statistic. Like they have that 1 in a million, disease or condition or what have you. And, 1 in a million, it does happen. And so this would be just a quick reference for them to say, okay, for these emergency care doctors or urgent care providers to be able to quickly scan, see that this parent is with it. They have their documentation, ready to go so that it's not, because I do think that potentially that the big binders of all the information can almost make it worse.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so this piece of advice that we have received, I think is, I just wanted to clarify that when I say a folder of one pagers, I really mean
a literal folder.
Yeah.
Not a banker's box, but a abbreviated and clear version, ideally in the language of the doctors, right?
Yeah, that you keep updated. Because with these complex children, whether it's, specifically medical or mental health or what have you, you will likely have kind of a directory of specialists you're seeing. And this folder could even just live in your car so that it's there if an emergency comes up.
Yep. We're all about helping you prepare for the road ahead, whatever that road ahead looks like at TFVC. So what happens when parents divorce? This is another common thing that people ask us. One of the more unfortunate situations that we deal with is when two parents who were formally in agreement about personalized vaccine schedules for their children find themselves divorcing, and one parent decides to use the vaccine issue as leverage in child custody proceedings. Yeah. In Texas, generally the decision to make non-invasive procedures, yes, vaccinations are considered non-invasive, is made jointly between the parents. The default presumption is that both parents are joint managing conservators, which essentially means that they make the parenting decisions together. Dr. Naidoo, have you heard of this situation happening?
Well, so that's something that I think helps to get some clarity on. Has it always been defined that vaccines are a non-invasive procedure, or is that?
Legally, they are defined as a non-invasive procedure.
It's so frustrating because these are injectables that you cannot uninject, like
they're irrevocable.
An injection to me seems by default to be invasive. it's not like a Band-Aid you're putting on.
Right.
But statutorily, courts consider vaccines is just so regular that they're non-invasive.
Wow. Wow. So that definitely, I think, kind of is another reason that families really need to be in unity about things, because I can easily see it. And I've been a part of it in about 3 different cases of divorce where that's been a point of contention, and it's created a lot of problems.
Yeah, I mean, the Texas default presumption, again, is that both parents are joint managing conservators, which means that they essentially make the decisions together. And this is in contrast to the sole managing conservatorship, in which a parent can make decisions solely or exclusively without the other parent's input, like to have like sole medical custody, where you get to make the medical decisions. It's generally a fairly difficult option to obtain unless the other parent has put the child's safety or well-being at risk before. And that is kind of where the vindictiveness can come in. Have you witnessed that happening with parents in your practice?
Yes, multiple times. Sometimes where the parents have eventually come to an agreement, but in other cases where it has gone to court.
Oh. Do you have any advice for parents that are going through that?
I think the one advice that I would say is that in those situations, I think if you're just so adamantly opposed to doing vaccines and you have another parent who is looking at vaccines, you're going to have to come to a happy medium there where you are going to look at doing some vaccines. But I think that a practice like ours, where we can do it in a very controlled environment, making sure that the child is extremely healthy, making sure that we do some of the genetic workup that we do to see if the child has a negative kind of reaction or an outcome from a vaccine. We're digging in a little bit deeper to see, like, can we continue with this process or should we do a halt on it? And again, in these situations, it's more temporary. We can't say there's a permanent halt most of the time, but in some instances, maybe there is a reason to do a more permanent halt on the vaccines. But I think having a practice like ours, who's going to be in that happy medium, that's what you're looking for. If you're a parent going through the situation and you're in a traditional medical practice, that physician or that practitioner is just going to say, yeah, we're going to do the CDC schedule. And I don't think that is appropriate at all either.
Yes, absolutely. The lesson of the night is do the work to find a practitioner that really mirrors and honors your informed consent rights. It's so important to have someone that you can be in relationship with and whose advice you can trust, that you can build a healthy lifestyle for your child with the wonderful information provided by a practice like Dr. Naidoo. So even if a child, again, what happens when parents divorce, even if a child has not received any vaccination, does not mean that the parent wishing to vaccinate the child automatically becomes the primary caretaker of the child, right? The judge will, or is at least supposed to, examine all of the evidence to make a decision based upon the best interest of the child. And there are a lot of factors that go into the best interests of a child that are far beyond vaccinations. But in our experience at TFVC, we think that most judges consider fully vaccinating in the best interest of all children. Texas vaccine statutes create a default position of these vaccines are required unless a parent has an objection. It seems that it is that default position of required on that judges most normally rely. So the best advice is to find an understanding lawyer who will advocate for your either exclusive right to make decisions in regard to vaccinations in the final decree, or to do the work to relationship build with your former partner and parent of your children to be able to come to some type of accommodation and agreement that doesn't have to be enforced or brought before the court. Those would be our best advice. Dr. Naidoo, do you have anything else to add to that?
Just like, we said, Carrie, if, that parent who doesn't want to vaccinate can be open to doing some vaccines, but doing it in obviously a very meticulous and conscientious way, I think that would be the best approach in that situation.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great advice. That's all we really had tonight. I'm happy to answer questions, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and see if I can get that to work.
Okay, we have a question come in from a community member that happens to be at the hospital right now. Child has severe food allergies. So it's a two-part question. The first part is, there's been 5 people ask me, is your child up to date on vaccines? What should I say? The second part is, they're already accusing me of not feeding him enough and thinking that I'm overreacting about the food allergies. So maybe you could take the first. What do we do with the question? Is your child up to date?
Well, are they up here in North Texas?
Mm-hmm.
If they are at a certain hospital, I would be very cautious about saying whether that they are not up to date. Am I allowed to call out Cook's children by name on this call?
That's your experience. Sure.
Oops. So I would be cautious about if you are at a Cook's facility not saying anything, because they have the worst track record of this kind of the medical kidnapping we talked about earlier. So I would, unless you are there thinking that your child has measles or something, I would just ask very kindly, like, I don't understand why this has anything to do with why we are here today.
Yeah. I think that's really good, Rebecca, is like, first to ask, do you think that the condition that my child is going through right now has something to do with the vaccine preventable illness? And then I think the other part to that is that we are, to be honest, we're doing a slower schedule, but it's under the care of our pediatrician. I think that's another way to propose that response as well.
And if a slower schedule means none at all right now, that's okay. It's not a lie.
Right.
Yeah. It's also good to recognize that that's considered a standard of care question. Just like they ask you what your pain level is and they ask you what your blood pressure is, asking if you're up to date on vaccines is a standard of care question that is usually in part of their charting as a healthcare provider.
Yes.
So they're going to ask you anyway, and they're not necessarily emotionally invested in your response.
Correct.
They're looking to check a box. And so saying something like Rebecca had suggested or Dr. Nader suggested about a slower schedule under the guidance of your pediatrician, that's like a magical phrase that isn't a no, but is a firm boundary and references your real authority, the pediatrician who will go to bat for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And any comment, Dr. Nadeau or Carrie or Rebecca, about the almost fear of judgment that this mom is dealing with, about them saying you need to give this child more to eat, when obviously she's been through the anaphylaxis and it's a big struggle and we're working with that child, but they're there due to, allergies, seasonal allergies and breathing difficulties. And then now all of a sudden they're inserting themselves about wanting to feed this child more.
So
how do you respond?
The child's not at the hospital because of a food allergy. It's
a breathing situation, but the child is extremely allergic. So mom is saying, no, we can't give him that. No, I'm sorry, we can't give him that. We have to do this. And then getting feeling of the
I'll let Dr. Nadeau take this one, but I will tell you, this is where the folder would come in handy. The folder of 1-pagers.
Yeah, the actual test results.
Right. I think having the test results and showing what the actual allergy profile is, I think when anybody sees a child that has an IgE level over like 1,000 or 2,000, we have some kiddos that we do blood work on and they are reacting to everything under the sun. I think if any medical practitioner would see that, they would understand that. But I think this goes back to another thing that we talked about before. Some families have these issues, but they're not really coming in for their appointments. And I think that, puts another real bullseye on your back when you're only integrating into the medical system when it is an emergency. And it can't be that way. So.
And I would also add for that mama to just take a deep breath and to remember that she is her child's best advocate and that nobody knows her child or that child's lived experience the way that that parent does. And that even if that medical professional in front of you can't recognize that because they're having a bad day, because humans do that, or maybe they need to have their awareness expanded about who has the power in the parent-child relationship, then, that can kind of help you to maintain that professional tone that you need, that's going to de-escalate that situation at the hospital system, so that you can give that folder and keep that connection going in a way that doesn't continue to escalate.
Agreed. And yes, just advocate and explain and articulate, and
mamas do hard things and papas do too.
Without challenging them.
Carrie, Rebecca, for our families that are on, we had one of our nurse practitioners. She brought a really good topic up at our meeting the other day about the Heritage Foundation. Do you know of any like legal counsel that our families can seek that would be in alignment with what like TFVC is about?
So, in fact, I just, for our podcast that I teased earlier, I had Bradley Pierce, who is one of the founders of Heritage Defense. I think that's who you're talking about, is Heritage Defense.
Yeah, Heritage Defense.
And he's a brilliant attorney, God-fearing, homeschooling family, or dad of I think they have like 11 kids now. It's just a beautiful, beautiful family. And he's what founded Heritage Defense for just this reason. You do have to be a Christian homeschooling family to be a member of Heritage Defense. But if you qualify for that, and for that label and that category, if you will, you can. It's I believe, an annual or maybe monthly fee, and it's kind of like having a CPS attorney on retainer, and so. That is a great resource. So it's Heritage Defense. And what's great about Heritage Defense for families that may not fall in that category is that they recently opened, I believe they're calling it a vault, for anybody that just subscribes to their website. You don't even have to pay any money. It's just a free resource where there's a vault of all sorts of topics, from, the eye ointment at birth to hepatitis B vaccines at birth and CPS issues. And so you can access this wealth of knowledge in their Heritage Defense Vault. And it's not just Texas specific. They have resources for many, many states, but they were founded in Texas. So that's kind of their specialty. But go to our Rumble channel and find that interview, because it's really a great interview.
We have a lot of great episodes of Shock Collars.
If somebody asked if you could say which hospital system you do feel comfortable with.
I think
the most important thing is to know your rights and be prepared to assert them effectively and professionally.
It's tricky because, COVID kind of shined this massive light on so much that now, before COVID, I probably would have said like maybe the Baylor system. But they had some major missteps as well. Some dear doctor friends I have were terminated over their mandates. And so I can't even say that anymore. It's a tough road for those that have, especially in an emergency situation. But I will tell you this, anybody that has even remote care of my kids knows that they will drive by 12 Cook's facilities to get to another facility.
Yeah. Medical City Dallas has been good. They don't have all of the specialties there, but they have, I think, appropriate balance in things. Usually Children's does as well, but sometimes, there can be some issues that have come up there. But I think the folder is important. I think parents have to have a higher standard by which they care for their children as they integrate into these different other medical establishments.
I keep a running timeline, so it's always accessible on my phone with some highlights, because I personally wouldn't have a folder handy, but digital folder too, guys, would work.
There you go.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways to communicate to your provider the health story of your child.
I know as a clinician, as a physician, lab results speak a lot to situations. So if parents have lab results, always have that readily available. That can help out a ton. Because if you don't have any lab results and your child is less than the third percentile on the weight curve, we're going to want to know what's happening with certain electrolyte things. And if a parent says, well, we didn't really ever get to doing that or anything, nobody ever told us about that, well, then those raise even bigger flags, right? But if a parent can say, hey, I saw my doctor, we ran this comprehensive metabolic profile, which you guys may not even know what that is, but the sodium and the potassium and the albumin and all those things look good. That gives a lot of comfort as a clinician of like, okay, well, this child has been taken care of and somebody has been paying attention.
Somebody on the chat is asking about a random audit with CPS, looking at Shine charts, and certainly that is not, we're not giving them access to our charts. Don't worry about that.
Right.
HIPAA and everything else. I think the concern mostly, as you guys stated, would be seeking emergency care outside of our office. But I don't think you need to be afraid. Just be prepared. And don't worry that they're going to track you down through us. Everything is completely confidential.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. We usually let families know whenever CPS is requesting any information on a child, we first ask the parent, are you okay with us communicating with CPS? If the parent says that they don't want us to communicate with CPS, then we can't share that record.
Does telling CPS that they don't want to do that, does that hurt a parent?
Carrie, I don't know. It potentially may, but that's a decision that the parent has to make in that, not for us as the medical provider.
I think that's the same as never allow a search on the highway, right? I mean, like you cannot, and you're allowed to refuse CPS at your door too, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we have been told that the best thing to say if a CPS person shows up on your door is to say, I understand you have the best interest of my children at heart. So do I. If you'll leave your card, my lawyer will be getting in touch with you in the next 48 hours. And if they want to put eyes on the children, you can do it through a window, in the dining room or what have you. But those are like the magical words we have been told is a great way. You do not have to allow them into your home. You have the best interest of my children at heart. So do I. Please leave your card and my lawyer would be happy to chat with you. And I just want to plug, we've talked about all these resources that TFVC has. We do have kind of this new directory of, friendly medical providers, lawyers, pastors. I mean, it's like the new resistance. I did want to say one other thing, because I know we're like really beating this CPS drum. And I just want to, and while the threats are real, right? I mean, we have been Carrie and I, and you guys have been on the front lines of dealing with this. I don't want to paint this picture as far as like, this is going to happen tomorrow to all of your families. If there's anybody that has the biggest target for CPS on their backs, it would be people like me and Carrie. And I will tell you, in the 9 years of TFVC, not one time has that even been a thing. And it's not hard to find either one of us. And when you're, looking at public records and, every day that I wake up and my house isn't spray painted, it's a good day. Right. So,
but it's never been spray painted.
Yeah, it has not. No, it has. But I just want to make sure, I just want to provide hope. I do want us to talk about the reality and how to protect ourselves, but I don't want anybody to come off this call thinking like CPS is weaponized in Texas because,
right.
We want to resource you, but also not have you live in fear.
And here's another, like, hopefully a word of wisdom. I think I've seen children who have started in a conventional medical model, and that child has become very, very ill through whether it's things that we've done on the medical model side or just the way that philosophy of care has brought about that outcome. And now the parent wants to kind of turn things around, and they're like, okay, well, now I want to be really natural about things. And I think that also sets up some risk factors there, right? Because you're coming from traditional, you're doing all these things this way, and then you said, okay, now I'm going to do it this way. And now, for whatever reason, that child becomes extremely sick, and they have to go into the establishment of an urgent care or an ER or a freestanding pediatric hospital. And if you've really like just kind of neglected the medical community. And maybe, like, as you mentioned, there's chiropractors involved, there's naturopaths, and then they look through there and there's no evidence of any physician that's being seen at all. That also creates a level of, dissension and, or contention is probably the better word, a level of contention. And that becomes a problem. So I think there are now more natural-minded MDs, DOs, NPs, PAs, where you can find somewhere to get plugged into that is somebody that is in the kind of like the quote-unquote traditional medical model, even if they're an integrative or functional medical provider.
That's a great
Carrie
point.
and Rebecca, since you guys have so much experience talking with families too, in addition to politicians, someone in the chat asked, what's your general basic guidance for a mixed opinion marriage about this being a very charged topic? One doesn't want to vaccinate, one does. We're not talking divorce, but how do you come together? Do you have any guidance on even where to start? A safe, gentle way to go about it?
I'll let Carrie handle this one.
Okay, I was waiting to see who was going to answer. Yes, so there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. In our new parent informed consent bundle referenced earlier, one of the documents in there in that red folder of information is a informed consent flowchart that really walks you through an informed consent process for each vaccine on the schedule. And so the two parents could get together and go through that process together and maybe come to some accommodation of a alternative or selective schedule. It also references, to research alternatives to vaccination. Some people like something like homeoprophylaxis, that is a different pathway to create a different type of immunity that, some parents feel is an alternative to traditional vaccination, but not, doing nothing. And so it can kind of help guide and inform a discussion. But ultimately, you want to try and work with your partner, because even in a divorce, you're still partners in parenting. And it's important to keep the best interest of the child in mind and be willing to be respectful and empathy-based and willing to build bridges in that conversation for the benefit of your child.
You got it. Yeah. And Carrie, in building that bridge, one of the things that I tell families who are going through that is come to that medium of hey, we're not going to do all 50 or 60 vaccines now that are on the schedule, but we're going to look at every one of the vaccines that's on the schedule. And husband, wife, are you willing for our child to at least do one dose of each of those vaccines that's on the schedule, so you don't feel like they're not protected against the vaccine preventable illness, right? And then you can check titers in the blood. You can see if there's protection. And sometimes there's dissension on that, or there's not, the proper alignment of, hey, do titers really represent being protected or not? But if those titers do show protection, then hopefully that parent that's kind of looking at the more traditional route of vaccines can say, hey, my kiddo only got one dose of this, but their blood work is showing protection. We don't need to do the second, third, fourth, or fifth dose of that right now.
Right.
Maybe we can wait on that. And then the other really big thing where you can kind of come to a happy medium is can we just make sure that the child is healthy when they're doing the vaccine and they're not going in being sick or have a lot of other health ailment issues going on? I think if we can get to that kind of happy medium, that would be a good start.
Yeah, I like what you said, Carrie. I'm sorry, Rebecca, go ahead.
I just wanted to chime in. I was trying to see if I had this book that I was on my desk, but I guess I lent it to a friend because it's not on my desk. But there's a lot of really great vaccine books. The one I was thinking about the most was called Vaccines 2.0, where Mark Blaxell goes through every injection, every disease, and it's all just statistics. And, and so if you can really drill down, okay, what is the prevalence of this disease for which there is a vaccine? And is it easily and readily treatable? And what are the, statistics of the injury profile for that vaccine? And is it more than this? Really Fear, I always say my best advice for these conversations is that fear has no place. A fear of the disease or a fear of an adverse reaction, fear has no place. You need to come from these decisions from a place of information and then proceed confidently. And, is it hard to find that information sometimes? Yes, it is. Big Pharma does a very good job of trying to hide that information. But with providers like Dr. Naidu, and, other resources. In fact, I'm pretty sure we have that informed consent flowchart linked on our website as well.
We do. And everything that you had mentioned from that Black Seal book with the information in detail is all included in that new parent informed consent bundle. So parents who are really can get a standalone, document for free on the website, or they can get a bundle and really just go through the information together and come to some kind of decision.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's wonderful advice. I mean, knowing what each one is, are we worried about this as a family? Do we have peace about it? Because you cannot undo it.
Yep. I always advise people, whatever your decision, know why you're saying yes or know why you're saying no. It doesn't matter to me what that decision is, but I want you to know why you said yes and you to know why you said no.
Absolutely. I think this is one final question in the chat about why are some pediatric offices allowed to refuse care to families not wanting to follow the CDC schedule?
Yeah. So
yes.
You go ahead. You go ahead, Doc.
Oh, yeah. I will tell you the main, it's financial. It is extremely hard in this day and age, and this is another elephant in the room root cause thing, where when a physician says, I will not be able to see you in the practice because of the decision you're making about vaccines, that physician is telling you that because it's a decision that is made not by him or her, but by the group or the entity that they work for. When you have real small pediatric practices, and this is a whole nother topic about how a lot of pediatric practices, the pediatrician is selling the practice to a bigger entity. Now you don't really have any control over the decision on how you want to care for your patient. And this is a bigger thing called a corporate practice of medicine. And this corporate practice of medicine is being really broken the way that these big hospital chains are working. So if you are a family and you're looking to take your child to a doctor, you really need to find a practice that is independent, that is not a part of these big hospital groups. That's really the issue. And then that next part is it's a financial issue. I mean, vaccines are a major revenue generator for pediatrics. So when you're a pediatric owner of a practice and you're not doing anything at all with vaccines, it's going to make an impact on that bottom line. So then if you want to go to a practice and that pediatrician wants to get paid the same amount that the one across the street does, or he wants to hire staff that's going to be able to be competitive with the staff across the street in terms of salary and stuff, they're not going to be able to do it. It's two completely different models of care. So then that's where parents also have to be willing sometimes, and I've seen this in the adult side, you may have to pay a little bit more money to see that kind of provider, but you have to understand the reason why you're paying that amount of money is because that practice has to keep up financially, and they can't do it if they're not doing anything at all with vaccines.
Well, and I would just say you either pay now or you pay later, right? When it comes to your health. And and I do want to just, you didn't really say this, Dr. Naidu, so I will say it on your behalf, but there's a lot of sacrifices that come to be a pediatrician that is foregoing the golden cow of big pharma. And so I just want to commend you for chasing after true patient-centered care and not the bottom line. And I know that you would never say those words, but, so just thank you. I do want to just highlight one policy initiative that we got fully passed last session, and that was HB 44, which was this was a priority bill. It's been a priority bill almost from day one of TFVC's foundation, and we call it our Medicaid discrimination bill. And that was a bill that said, if you are a Medicaid or CHIP doctor, you can no longer discriminate, as in refuse to see children based on vaccination status. And while it is just focused on these families that receive the state benefits, I contend that those are our most vulnerable Texans.
Yes,
By
yes.
default, these are our most vulnerable Texans. And why vulnerable Texans would be refused informed consent? It's just, this is the nonsense that keeps me up at night. And so because these doctors have entered into a contract with the state, these are taxpayer dollars that are reimbursing these doctors. And this is a state that has a long history of valuing and honoring parental rights when it comes to vaccines. So this whole idea of a state paid doctor being able to refuse service based on vaccines is essentially state sanctioned discrimination. And it has ended in Texas. Yes. Now, I know that doesn't necessarily impact Shine Pediatrics, but
but it's huge. It's huge.
But it was huge because this was an access to care issue. It really was. And we are committed to seeing this kind of patient discrimination ended, no matter who's paying, to be clear.
Rebecca, Carey, could you speak to something? I know that we have a few more questions that are coming in, but I was listening to Del Bigtree, and then he took me down the trail of the ruling in West Virginia, where the governor there vetoed the legislators about the vaccine exemption. Are y'all familiar with that case in West Virginia?
So there was a bill to expand exemptions,
right, to expand exemptions, and the governor vetoed it.
You know, I knew that West Virginia did not allow exemptions. There's a handful of states that have very, very restricted exemptions or no exemptions at all. And West Virginia is one of them. And I personally did not know that this was a bill that got fully passed and then was vetoed. That's really, it's really frustrating to hear, because I remember probably 5 years ago, I was comparing autism rates state by state, and West Virginia has one of the highest rates of autism in the nation and also has no vaccine exemptions. And we'll just let your smart listeners draw those conclusions.
Well, and also grassroots activists, just like our supporters in Texas with TFVC, exist in other states, and states have worked together within themselves in a grassroots manner to sometimes conquer a long-standing ban on exemptions that happened in Mississippi, where they were able to finally regain the exemption since like the 70s. So even you're in a state, the thing is to continue to advocate and have the conversation and get better at having the conversation and do the work to improve your community and get it back. It's not all lost.
And what's great about the good work of Del Bigtree and Aaron Seary and the team that they have compiled is that they have sued states and won over nonsense. So I imagine that the battle is not done in West Virginia.
Yeah, they do something similar and different. They help with the legal fight, and we help with community and legislatively.
Aaron's a genius. Aaron Seary's a genius.
We are blessed as a nation to have him on the front lines, for sure.
We truly are. Agreed.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all so much. Do you mind just giving us a glimpse? Everybody, you need to come back next Thursday for part 2.
Yeah,
part 2. Talk about the politics in Texas and the fight, and what else will we cover next week?
The other kind of meaty topic that Dr. Naidoo asked us to cover is, the young adults population. As people kind of age out of this practice, how do we talk about some of the issues that kind of the young adults may encounter as they go forth in their lives, trying to hopefully hang on to this healthy lifestyle that the parents have instilled in them.
Okay, so like maybe even joining the military or going to college. What are their rights? Okay.
Correct.
Awesome.
Yes. And just kind of like the political landscape of Texas, especially in light of the recent primary here in Texas. So we're going to kind of pick apart some of those meaty topics next week.
Excellent. Because we cannot rest, or we will lose all our rights if we're not careful. So thank y'all again for fighting for us, and we look forward to next week. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carey. Thank you, Rebecca.
Lots of thanks coming in on the chat for y'all. So thank you. Good night, everybody. See you next time.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Shot Callers podcast. Please, if you found value in this content, rate us and share the podcast with a friend. It's a great way to get the message out and to empower everyone to make informed decisions. Until next time, never forget, we are the Shot Callers.